Hello and welcome back to my very first remastered episode. Now this is series 1, episode 23. Just before Christmas, back in December, I decided to do the history of the James Bond video games. However, since then, I have obviously now edited my videos and inserted videos and photographs. Which has made me never really happy with the original episode. So this is now a remastered edition. It's been trimmed, so there's approximately about 40 minutes took off it. It's been edited. I've now added footage, I've now added photographs, which I hope kind of gives it more of a watchable and enjoyable experience. So thank you once again, and please enjoy the history of the James Bond video games. Hello and welcome to another episode from The Man from Hildebrand. Today I'm going to be delving into the history of the James Bond video games. This is something I've been wanting to do for a while, and it's been something I've been sort of looking forward to do, because I kind of felt that there's not really, to my knowledge, there's not really much information out there documented, regarding the kind of the world of video game Bond. And obviously with 007 First Light kind of only about 4 months away, and I kind of feel that the publicity and the hype will soon be, as soon as that game's out, the public will think there's a Bond film out. You're going to see billboards at bus stops, on buses, you're going to see adverts on telly. It's only going to be a matter of time before Amiga probably potentially release a watch to coincide with the release. I mean, so far with the publicity and the little snippets we've seen online, it's kind of just as much that you would have expected from a Bond film. So I just thought, this is probably a perfect time to kind of go through the history of the Bond games and kind of talk you through it and give my kind of personal experience on playing them. I mean, over the years we have had quite a good solid amount, really. But with 007 First Light, it is by IO Interactive, who do the Hitman series. I'm just kind of hoping that this will probably be, already it's been nominated for the most anticipated game. So hopefully, for us hardcore Bond fans, it'd be great if it was a success. I believe is the first game of a planned trilogy. Of course, that kind of depends on how well the sales are. So anyway, I'm going to jump straight into it. The history of the James Bond video games. So yeah, the video games can go as far as back as in the 1980s. 1983, the first, I don't know if you even know you could call them video games, but there was a game published by Parker Brothers, simply titled James Bond 007, and that was available on the Commodore 64 and the Atari. 1985, things looked a little bit solid because a company called Domac had gained the license. So in 1985 they released A View to a Kill, which was sort of a film adaptation. 1986 they did Goldfinger. 1987 they did The Living Daylights. 1988 they did Live and Let Die. 1989 they did License to Kill. And 1990 saw the release of The Spy Who Loved Me, as well as Lord Bramley's Estate and Q's Armoury. There was also marketing material advertising Octopussy, which never, for whatever reason, materialised. So those games were again available on the Atari and on the Commodore 64. As you can imagine, I've never played them. I can remember seeing clips of them, and compared to today's standard, they are, yes, they would have been fun, but it was kind of like Space Invaders kind of level of graphics. The Live and Let Die game had the boat chase, and then you got to early, probably about 91, 91 or 93 time, Domac released The Duel, which was for the Sega Mega Drive, and this would have been around the time when there would have been no film in development due to legal issues, but Timothy Dalton was clearly still James Bond, because on the cover was the publicity still of Timothy Dalton using License to Kill. So this was clearly to represent that Timothy Dalton was Bond. That did have an original storyline, so that wasn't based on any particular film. I like to sort of kind of see, I don't know whether or not you've played it, but there's 007 Cypher on Apple Arcade. I kind of see that as like a little bit of an updated version of them games. I mean, that's if you haven't got the 007, I would recommend it, because it's brilliant. I love it. I keep checking onto it to see if it's been expanded, because I believe now you've got the Skyfall level on there, which for some reason I haven't got, but I believe it is available. But it is brilliant, because like the old MI6 team is clearly inspired by the Daniel Craig era, even sort of Q's workshop. But Bond himself is kind of like the Roger Moore Bond, and you kind of have brilliant. It kind of harks back to some classic moments of the series. You know, you've got sort of the You Only Live Twice setup with the volcano and Flying Little Nelly, and then you've got Spy Love Me with the Liparus and the Atlantis and all that. I think the first sort of chapter of the game was like based loosely on GoldenEye, but I believe there's a fourth one now which is based on Skyfall. But yeah, I basically see 007 Cypher as kind of an updated version of these games which Domac gave us in the 1980s. Domac then later became part of the Eidos group. Eidos, of course, was then the people who gave us the first Tomb Raider game for the PlayStation. But I remember Eidos fondly because they gave us the James Bond interactive dossier, which I think was like around 95, 96, a CD-ROM for Windows 95, and I've still got it upstairs somewhere in the attic, and I can remember just being absolutely immersed by it, because it was just an interactive guide to the world of James Bond. It covered all the films from Doctor No through to GoldenEye. Each film had its section, with which I loved, which was the appropriate font, and it had information on the characters, the cast and crew. You had trivia, you had little trailers, you had quizzes, and it kind of also told you what was happening in the world of the time that the film was released. 1992, THQ released James Bond Jr. for the Nintendo. I would have obviously been tied in with the cartoon series. Fast forward to 1997, this was obviously where it was a massive game changer. GoldenEye 64 came out. That, if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't be doing these videos now, because that's what introduced me to the world of Bond and got me hooked and obsessed. That was became, it probably is seen as being a pop culture kind of thing, cult. Every Bond game that's been after is always compared to GoldenEye. I mean, the beauty of that was it was a first-person shooter. It was the first game to have multiplayer, and it kind of basically launched the Nintendo 64. You know, the people, it was a huge selling point. Even so, I think Nintendo did like limited edition packs, gift packs, where GoldenEye came with the console, and you could get gold controllers, and it was absolutely, you know, incredible. I mean, my dad, well, still is a big Nintendo fan, so he had every single Nintendo from the beginning, from the first Nintendo Entertainment System to the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, then to the 64. And I can remember, you know, Saturdays, him and his mate would come around and they would play multiplayer, and they would select Odd Jobs, Scaramanga, Baron Samedi, Jaws, and they would play all these different, and for them, who was obviously a lot older than me, they would know who these characters were, so it was very nostalgic for them. And I'd be like, well, who are these people? You know, and they'd say, oh yeah, well, they're from such and such film. I'm thinking, God, there's more films, and you know, and that there just, I think, kind of is what made me so intrigued into the world of Bond, because there was so much more other than GoldenEye. There was history, and it was just, yeah, a whole new experience. Um, and I mean, even, I mean, there's a documentary on Amazon, Golden Era, which is about the making of that game, and it's definitely worth a watch. The history of the GoldenEye game was, it was initially talked about for it to be released on the Super Nintendo Entertainment System for a '95 release to coincide with the film, but then they decided to, you know, why not wait until the Nintendo 64, and instead of having it 2D, they make it 3D. So yeah, it was available for the Nintendo 64 only. In North America and Japan, it was available on a Nintendo system called the Virtual Boy, which was basically like a headset, kind of virtual reality thing. After a year, that kind of failed. I don't know if it's because it was sort of errors with the actual system or the sales, but there's 22 games available on that system, and GoldenEye was one of them. Come to 98, 97, obviously Tomorrow Never Dies was released as well at the cinema. 98, MGM Interactive pitched an idea where they was to develop a game which was to be marketed as the game begins where the film ends, and this was going to be a sequel to Tomorrow Never Dies. Come 99, Electronic Arts then come along and got the license, and they basically decided to do a film adaptation of Tomorrow Never Dies. They obviously thought, okay, you know, we'll try and do better than what GoldenEye did. Didn't quite, commercially wasn't quite the success they were hoping for. It was only available for PlayStation. I can remember the opening level. I think you had the gun barrel. So with it being a CD, you had clips from the actual film inserted into the gameplay. So you had the gun barrel from the film playing, and then it opened up onto a skiing sequence. Now, in the early drafts of Tomorrow Never Dies, and even I think in Raymond Benson's novelisation, he talks about the process of what Bond went through to actually get to the Russian Arms Bazaar. It wasn't multiplayer, it was third person, so you could actually see Bond, which kind of made it different to GoldenEye. You could also, halfway through the game, I think there was an option or an opportunity where you could play as Wei Lin. But yeah, unfortunately, I don't think it kind of got the GoldenEye. I mean, they was hoping to have got another GoldenEye hit, but unfortunately they didn't. November 2000, Electronic Arts then did The War Is Not Enough. This was released only on Nintendo 64. It was again multiplayer and first person, so they was then kind of realising the mistakes of Tomorrow Never Dies and thought, okay, we'll try and do this. Again, there was not enough. I can remember playing vaguely on the Nintendo 64. I can remember the banker's office. I can remember being very disappointed that there was no boat chase, because I mean, I still love the film to this day, but I remember at the time that boat chase was absolutely fantastic. It was the highlight of the film. It was incredible, and I was kind of really looking forward to experiencing that via video game format. And for whatever reason, there wasn't. I don't know if it was down to budget or down to not having the technology to develop it, but the boat chase was cut entirely from the game, and it resulted in a little foot chase around London and defusing a bomb in a public toilet. Kind of a little bit of an anticlimax. It was for the Nintendo and the PlayStation. Again, the PlayStation did include film footage, and the reason was because it was on a CD, so they could, whereas obviously with the Nintendo it was a cartridge. It also went a step further because you actually had the voices. So in GoldenEye 64 you just had subtitles, there was no speaking voices, but in this you had John Cleese. He provided the voice of his character R. Bond himself wasn't done by Pierce Brosnan, but was dubbed by Adam Blackwood, who would then go on to provide the voice for Bond in EA's next 2 Bond games. The World Is Not Enough was planned for PlayStation 2 and PC, but was cancelled. More on that later. So we come to 2001 with 007 Racing. This again was only available for PlayStation, wasn't available for Nintendo. That I can remember. I don't know why, but me and my dad went halves on PlayStation, and I got that, and I can remember finding that very difficult. The first level using the Aston Martin, and I don't know if it's because I was used to Nintendo controls and not PlayStation controls, but I found them quite sensitive. You was under a bit of a, I think you had to do something with it an X amount of time, so you was kind of under pressure. But I found that game a little bit difficult to play. So you could drive the Aston Martin DB5, a Lotus Esprit, BMW Z3, the BMW 750 from Tom Never Dies. It might have been the Z8. I like to think that there might have been Xenia's Ferrari in there. I can't remember. I never got that far to experience the other vehicles. But again, John Cleese provided his voice, and Judi Dench provided her voice as M. A sequel was planned, but I would imagine down to the sales it never happened, which was a real shame, because again I mean, you could have had so much potential with 007 Racing 2. You could have had multiplayer. It could have been like the Mario Kart of Bond World. You know, you could have raced each other. You could have blown each other up with your gadget-laden vehicles. You could have introduced more cars, you know. November 2001 saw the release of Agent Under Fire. Again, this was EA's second original Bond game. I mean, I can remember absolutely loving that, because I was sort of in, at the time where we had no Bond film, it was in between The Was Not Enough and Dawn of the Day. That to me filled the gaps perfectly. It didn't have Pierce's likeness. It was sort of a hybrid between Pierce Brosnan and Roger Moore, I think, with the voice by Adam Blackwood. It was a multiplayer game. It was first-person shooter as well, first-person perspective. There were some really cool driving games. You could drive the DB5 around Budapest, and you had the Z8, I think, around Tokyo, so you could blow things up. The storyline, if I remember rightly, kind of featured something to do with cloning the world leaders, and I kind of always saw that at the time. I mean, in the 90s, I think that's when they successfully cloned the first sheep, Dolly the sheep. So cloning was quite a relatively new thing. It was at the time when there was genetically modified crops, when that would make the news. Obviously 26 years ago it seemed a little bit too far-fetched, but I think now cloning humans, I think, would be probably a potential plotline for a future, you know, for a Bond film now. The gameplay was actually quite easy as well. I managed to complete this from start to finish. So when they was looking at doing The Was Not Enough for PlayStation 2 and PC, it was cancelled. Now, I don't really understand how they do games, but basically the development to kind of upgrade into developing for PlayStation 2 kind of fell apart, and then ended up becoming this instead. They thought, you know what, we might as well make just an original Bond game. It probably explains why the Z8 makes an appearance, because that would have obviously been taken from The Was Not Enough video game. Zoe's Nightshade, a CIA agent, she's kind of very similar to Christmas Jones. She's also voiced by Karen Pascoe, who also did the voice of Christmas Jones. there was the villain of this, Nigel Block, which always reminded me of Phil Mitchell. He looks very similar to Renard, so you kind of see like certain elements from the Warzone stuff has kind of crept into here. Probably not so much storyline, but certainly visually. And then 2002, we go to Electronic Arts' third original Bond game, Night Fight. Now I know Mr. Calvin Dyson is an absolute fan of this game, and it's not bad. It's not bad. I actually really liked it as well. It's been a long time since I played it, but I can remember having a lot of fun with that. So that came out in November 2002. Obviously 2002 was the 40th anniversary since the release of Dr. No. It was also the release of Die Another Day. Now, there was a lot of speculation in the gaming world and amongst Bond fans that EA would give us an adaptation of Die Another Day. Now, in issue 66 of the Nintendo GameCube magazine, it was reported that EA's latest Bond game title, Agent Under Fire, may not appear on GameCube and Xbox consoles in Europe. PlayStation 2 has a 6-month exclusivity deal, and as Agent Under Fire was released in November in America on the PS2 console, it cannot be released until May time in Europe. The problem is caused because Phoenix Rising, EA's next Bond game, is out in November to coincide with Die Another Day being released in cinemas. So Phoenix Rising was originally meant to have been based loosely on Die Another Day. I can remember seeing sort of early kind of concept screenshots of Bond jumping from a Seahawk helicopter onto an hovercraft. There was also John Cleese, Ali Berry and Rosamund Pike had also signed their permission to use their likeness and voices for this game. You had this time, you had sort of the animated gun barrel within the gameplay, so it wasn't the gun barrel taken from the film, it was specifically made for this. So you had the gun barrel, you had the music, you had a pre-title sequence in a helicopter going around Paris, and then you had a title sequence with a song by Estero, Nearly Civilized, and I can remember just being absolutely fucking blown away. I mean, I was losing my shit on Christmas Day when I was experiencing this, and somebody said, God, what are you going to be like when you've lost your virginity? Again, I mean, I thought Agent Under Fire kind of hit the mark, but Nightfire went that step further. And Nightfire, it kind of, with it being released in 2002, which was a very memorable year for me as a Bond fan, it did play, you know, kind of pay nods. It kind of certainly paid nod to Moonraker. It was obviously you know, you went into space, and then you had a bit where you was on sliding down a cable car line, which obviously a nod to Moonraker. There was a scene where the Aston Martin Vanquish was on ice, which may have come from the original idea of it being based loosely on Die Another Day. And it also became amphibious as well. And Zoe Nightshade, she makes a comeback, and there's actually a few little cameos in Nightfire which kind of, to me, make both Agent Under Fire and Nightfire kind of a pair. I think when Bond goes underwater in the Aston Martin, there was something that says Malprive Industries. Well, Malprive was one of the villains from Agent Under Fire. But Nightfire was available on PlayStation 2, Nintendo GameCube and Xbox, and also PC as well, which Agent Under Fire wasn't. February of 2004. Now, originally it was scheduled for November 2003 release, but for whatever reason it was postponed till February 2004, and this was of course Everything or Nothing. This is considered by many Bond fans as Pierce Brosnan's 5th James Bond film. I totally get why. At this point, Electronic Arts was kind of getting better and better. They were building, I mean, Nightfire gave us the cinematic Bond experience. Everything and Nothing gave us the ultimate cinematic Bond experience. It was no longer first person, it was third person, and you had not only the likeness of Pierce Brosnan, but you had his voice as well. You had Judi Dench, John Cleese, Shannon Elizabeth, Heidi Klum, Willem Dafoe. People forget this. People don't realise that Willem Dafoe was a Bond villain. They went all out in it. And yeah, it was absolutely fantastic. Again, you had the pre-title sequence. You had a title sequence with a song sung by Mia. Now, what I found interesting with this game was it played a lot of tribute to the Roger Moore Bond films. You had Jaws make a comeback. There was mention of Max Zorin, which there was this brilliant line in the game where Willem Dafoe's character Nikolai Diablo was a protege of Max Zorin, and says, "Oh yeah, I believe you knew Max Zorin." And Bond's line was, "Well, you know, we once played bridge together. He lost." Talking of dialogue, Bruce Feirstein played a hand in this as well. Of course, Bruce, he works on GoldenEye, Tomorrow Never Dies, The World's Not Enough. So he was already familiar with the world of Bond, and Brosnan's Bond in particular. Bond goes to New Orleans, which he hasn't been since Live and Let Die. The Aston Martin Vanquish makes an appearance, as well as Triumph motorbikes and the Porsche 4x4. You had a lot of driving scenes, so you had to chase around New Orleans. You could drive the Cayenne. There was a bit where you're driving across the desert. So yeah, I mean, if that was a film, it would have been an epic film. And yeah, and you had a wonderful score as well, fantastic score. The gameplay, it kind of improved over the years. But yeah, it is Pierce Brosnan's fifth James Bond film, and it was absolutely incredible. Is it the E3? They have like video game sort of, what do I say, conferences, but like shows, you know, where developers come and bring up the upcoming games. Electronic Arts did a bit of a trailer of a pre-title teaser. Pierce Brosnan again. It was a nighttime, had like a harbour, bit of a fight, fisticuffs, and then he jumps into a boat and speeds off. That was a teaser for a follow-up to Everything and Nothing, which was actually called Phoenix Rising. That never materialised because obviously Pierce Brosnan then lost his contract. EA are like, well, what do we do? What do we do? They then decide to go a little bit bonkers, and at the time, it just I hated this, but I have learned come to love it because I actually re-experienced this during COVID. They then gave us GoldenEye Rogue Agent. Now, this is basically them tagging on to the fact that, oh, you know, GoldenEye was a huge success in the 90s. If we have that in the title, it'll become another success. It was totally different to that game. I mean, I can remember receiving this for Christmas 2004. I can remember playing it Christmas Day severely hungover, which obviously took out the experience, and I just didn't enjoy it. I just thought, what I was expecting another Everything or Nothing. It went back to first person shooter. The storyline, it was quite. I revisited this during COVID, and I actually finished the game and actually loved it, and it gave me a whole new love for it and perspective of it, and I kind of feel that it is very underrated. So the story is, you play I think 006, Jack Hunter. Bond is killed whilst under your watch. You then get suspended from the service. You then get picked up, I think, by Goldfinger. I think you then work for Goldfinger. Scaramanga, voiced by Christopher Lee, comes and gives you a golden eye, which is a bionic eye. It turns out that Goldfinger and Dr. No are at war. One of them works for Spectre. Well, the interesting thing is, in the video game, EA don't have the right to Spectre. They refer to as Octopus and Blofeld as number one. It was great because you encountered Goldfinger, Doctor No, Pussy Galore, Xenia on the Top, Odd Job. It was actually the last project that Ken Adam worked on before he died, because he did some of the concept designs for the production. The last level was quite hard because you had bad guys left, right and centre. But I think you end up basically in this volcano lair with a Donald Pleasance-like character approaching you, who was basically employing you and setting you on. After experience reliving it during COVID, I absolutely really loved it, and I thought, you know what, that's a really interesting concept. So it was something that kind of grew on me. Again, there was a sequel planned, and I would have loved to have seen that sequel because there was so much potential. You could have introduced a lot more villains. You could have done so much. Paul Oakenfold, who did a Bond theme cover for Die Another Day, did the music for this, so he's a DJ, so there's a lot of sort of heavy techno music. Natasha Bedingfield did a song called If You're Gonna Jump. She kind of collaborated with Paul Oakenfold on that, and there was, you know, a bit of a, you could hear vaguely the Bond theme playing on that. 2005, Electronic Arts, they gave us From Russia with Love. Not only did they give us a film adaptation, but obviously they got Sean Connery back. This was Sean Connery's last ever role, before he retired. By the time he came to this, I think he came to a bit of peace and agreed to do it, providing he could only do From Russia with Love because that was his favourite out of all of them. Bond, Red Grant, Rosa Klebb, Tanya Romanova, they all make an appearance, plus additional characters such as Elizabeth Stark, who was the Prime Minister's daughter, voiced and had the likeness of Natasha Bedingfield, and another character called Eva Adara. Again, even though Spectre plays a prominent role, it's never mentioned, clearly referred to as Octopus. Again, you had a pre-title sequence which was totally different from the film. You had Bond on a jetpack, saving the Prime Minister's daughter, and Natasha Bedingfield, and flying around London, round Big Ben. Now, this was an idea that was originally conceived for The World Is Not Enough. It's pretty faithful to the film. They've obviously had to, you know, kind of add in other levels and stuff to make an action pack. I can always remember the scene where Bond's got to shoot Krylenko, I think, when he's with Karen Bay, as he comes out of Marilyn Monroe's mouth. In the game, you've got like snipers left, right and centre, so you've got to kind of shoot them all off. There's a couple of driving levels, so the DB5 makes an appearance. You kind of have a chase around Istanbul. When I first saw No Time to Die and you had the Aston Martin going around Matera in broad daylight, that always reminded me of the From Russia with Love video game. Now I can remember the end. So you didn't exactly kill Grant on a train. You end up killing Grant somewhere else, and Grant was in some sort of mechanical octopus. I don't know. It was a bit weird, but nonetheless, still very good game. I don't think it's ever kind of beaten GoldenEye 64, but I think it was very well received. After the success of this, which was an experimental thing really, because it got the likeness and voice of an ex-Bond actor, they was looking at doing Moonraker with Sir Roger Moore. That unfortunately never materialised. Come 2006, they was also kind of talking about doing a adaptation of Casino Royale with Daniel Craig, but due to whatever reason, they couldn't get it out in time to coincide with the release. Not long after that, Electronic Arts then decided to give up the Bond license because they wanted to focus on the sporting side as opposed to the film side, even though they were still doing Harry Potter and Star Wars. Bit of a shame really, because Electronic Arts, I think, had a really good run and did some really memorable games, and they kind of sort of experimented a bit, you know, especially with GoldenEye Rogue Agent. They kind of thought, okay, we'll do a game without Bond being in it, but where you play the bad guy, and they obviously, you know, did From Russia with Love and 007 Racing. So they certainly kind of sort of experimented. And overall, I kind of miss them, because at the time I was sort of I mean, I'd have loved if they did all of the Bond films at the time and just sort of reworked them for video games. So, come 2008, we then receive Quantum of Solace. Now, this was the first game to be released by Activision, who had now got the Bond license. So yeah, they had basically got the Bond license for 10 years, and they had the rights to the films and to Ian Fleming publications. So I thought, well, okay, that's interesting, because they could explore stuff in the novels which even the film world hasn't explored. So yeah, they gave us Quantum of Solace, and with the likeness of, I can't remember, Daniel Craig may have provided his voice for it, but Quantum of Solace was basically a mashup of both Quantum and Casino Royale in once. Casino Royale acted as a flashback. It was different because it was a different developer. I was used to EA and how they worked. This was now Activision, which actually, after a bit, I actually loved their system, because I then soon became immersed in Call of Duty, became obsessed, started buying all the Call of Duty games, and I absolutely loved them because they were the same. They you know, like the sight was like automatic. It kind of told you where to go, and the Bond Activision games was that same kind of engine. The only gripe I had about Quantum of Solace was there was a sequence where you had to go and kill Arlington Beach, which of course is mentioned in Casino Royale, but you had to jump from one train to another. Now, if you didn't get your position right in where to jump, you would then just fall down between the two trains. Now, I'm sure I'm not the only person who had this. If you've experienced this, please let me know in the comments. The checkpoint was right between the transition of jumping between two trains. If you got it wrong, you would fall between the two trains. It would then keep starting the checkpoint, and you could do nothing because it was on a loop. You kept falling down, you kept falling, you kept falling. The only way to get over it was to turn the bloody machine off and to start again, and to reposition yourself, either slide it to the left or to the right, to avoid falling down the gap. So yeah, I can remember you had the Madagascar foot chase, but I can remember you know, kind of trying to balance along the top of the crane, and then you had the hotel that blew up in Quantum of Solace, and then you had the opera scene, you had the sinking house in Venice. Oh, and there's Mr. White's house as well. It was Activision's first Bond game, and unfortunately I don't think Activision made much of a success of how they dealt with Bond. Bloodstone. This was the second game by Activision, and like that of Everything or Nothing, it was a totally original adventure. It was third person. You had, you know, and I really liked it because it was an original story. You had a fantastic score by Richard Jacques, which, if that ever gets released on album, CD, it needs to be bought because it's absolutely amazing. You get Joss Stone and Dave Richards, gives you the title song. Daniel Craig again provides his voice and likeness. Judi Dench, Joss Stone even plays a character in there. It was an absolutely incredible game. You've got an intense action sequence where you in a boat. You know, so what we didn't get in the Was Not Enough game, we have now got in Bloodstone, because there's a boat chase along Athens Harbour and you're blowing the crap out of everything. What I really like about it is he kind of emphasises the brutality of Daniel Craig's Bond. I mean, you can obviously shoot people, but you can have hand-to-hand combat, and you can interact with other objects and just clobber them around the head. And, you know, it is pretty violent. And yeah, I kind of see this as Daniel Craig's film of 2010. It's kind of interesting because it's set up as Quantum, you know, this secret organisation, Quantum, being the villain. Obviously, it wouldn't be until a few years after we realised it's Spectre. But it turns out that Joss Stone's character is also working or being watched by Quantum. So it kind of ties into that. You could drive the DBS, and obviously there's a boat chase in Athens Harbour, but there was also a lovely nod to the Devil May Care novel, where there's a scene which involves a Kranaplan, which is obviously that Soviet plane versus boat which just hovers. So there's a huge kind of set game on there. He visits Serbia. There was a sequel planned, rumoured to be called none other than Risico. There was actually some screenshots and renders and stuff. That never materialised. To follow that, Activision then decide to kind of brand into the GoldenEye game, but they called it GoldenEye Reloaded. Which I kind of feel that if a certain game publisher has got to publish a game with GoldenEye in the title, they're not doing great in sales, because they're clearly trying to capture, you know, lightning in a bottle, which GoldenEye 64 did. GoldenEye Reloaded, it was first person shooter just like the original GoldenEye, and again it featured the likeness and sound of Daniel Craig. I personally can't see the point in that game. I would have rather have had an original game. It just seemed pointless because it was just a GoldenEye remake. Valentin Sikovsky wasn't no longer big or had the likeness of Robbie Coltrane. It was totally opposite. The characters were still there. The storyline was still the same. The highlight of it was David Arnold did the music with Kevin Kilner, and they also Nicole Scherzinger actually did the GoldenEye theme tune, so she did a cover of GoldenEye with David Arnold reorchestrating. Judi Dench and Rory Kinner come back and provide the voices. The last one is 007 Legends. Now this was the last game that we ever had from Activision. This was released in 2012. It was to basically commemorate 50 years of Bond. Again, you had, what let this down is you had the likeness of Daniel Craig, but not the voice of Daniel Craig. And I thought, well, hang on, if you're going to do this, you've got to have the voice of Daniel Craig. So with it being 50 years of Bond, it kind of opens up sort of the opening of Skyfall, where Bond's on the bridge and he gets shot, and as he falls into the water, it then plays a flashback of certain films and missions is done. We've got in total 6 missions, kind of chapters if you like. You've got the first one, which is Goldfinger. Again, it's first person shooter. Instead of Sean Connery, you're Daniel Craig. It's just all brought up to modern time. You've got Goldfinger, and then you've got On a Master's Secret Service, Moonraker, License to Kill, Die Another Day, and then there was an online add-on pack for Skyfall. It included the likenesses of Judi Dench, Rory Kinnear, Naomi Harris, Michael Lonsdale, Toby Stevens and Carrie Lowell. Obviously, you know, Michael Lonsdale, he played Drax, Toby Stevens was Gustav Graves, Carrie Lowell was Pam Bouvier in License to Kill. It was a relatively easy game. It was a bit generic, a bit repetitive, because each kind of mission, like the Goldfinger mission, the Majesty's mission, it was like a template. You know, you knew what to expect. You had to do the same thing through all of them. You had to, when you entered an office, you had to kind of get one of your gadgets out and kind of scan everywhere, get as much data. You then, there was a bit where you had to decode something. So all this appeared in all their missions. So it was totally very repetitive. So the henchmen, you on each chapter, you had a confrontation with either Jaws, Oddjob, or Zhao, and it was usually near like an edge, and you had to press certain buttons really quick to kind of punch them and take them off. The only thing I was disappointed was for the License to Kill level, I was kind of hoping to drive the tankers, but no, it was none of that. I think he was on the back of like an army truck or something. I did like the fact that David Arnold again did the music, and he would pay tribute to, so for the Her Majesty's level, he would have a bit of the John Barry Her Majesty's in there. Moonraker, he would have a bit of Moonraker in there. But yeah, it was a good game. It got criticised a little bit because it was a bit weird. But my only sort of critique of it was that they should have had Daniel Craig's voice in it at least. I kind of understand the concept behind it because it is kind of to sort of commemorate and sort of pay tribute to 50 years of Bond. I totally get, but I think what would have been better is if they'd actually got Roger Moore in to do his little bit, got Timothy Dalton back to lend his voice and likeness, to get George Lazenby to lend his voice and likeness, to get Connery back to lend his voice and likeness. I think that would have been something. I think that would have made it special. So yeah, I mean, the gameplay was easy. It was just a little bit repetitive and just I just don't think Activision had the same kind of originality or creativity as Electronic Arts did. With 007 Legends being a complete failure, this forced the developer Eurocom to close due to bankruptcy, and for Activision to quit producing Bond games in February 2013, even though their license didn't expire till 2014. I think if EA had carried on, it would have been a lot more successful. Yeah, we could have got Moonraker with Roger Moore, we could have got Casino Royale, we could have got Quantum, we could have got a couple of original Bond games, we could have probably got Skyfall. But yeah, no, I think EA did a really good job. I think Activision just, yeah, kind of, they tried the best, but I think they made some really dodgy decisions. So yeah, that is basically the quick, well, say quick has been an hour. So that is it's probably the longest video yet. So that's basically sort of kind of the brief history of the video games of James Bond. So yeah, we will see. Let's just hope IO Interactive have a better success than Activision, because I kind of feel that really it was Activision kind of totally fucked Bond up and kind of lost it. No, it was something I've been wanting to talk about for a while because I just felt like it's never really been discussed. And yeah, so in terms of Bond, it's another platform, another kind of medium it's kind of reached. And so anyway, that's me waffling on. You've probably seen the sun rising up slowly. So yeah, it's been a pleasure. I will be back, I don't know, it might be this year, might be next year. If I've got enough news to do another Bond roundup, I will see if I'll give you one before Christmas. If not, all have a good Christmas. I hope you get plenty of Bond goodies. I know I've got a couple. Yes. If I don't see you all before Christmas, have a good one. Make sure you watch plenty of Bond films. Make sure you get plenty of good Bond goodies, and you know, just keep asking yourself, keep reminding yourself, and you know, just keep reminding yourself on how Christmas trees are grown, because I'm sure Nina will happily tell you. So anyway, that's it for now. Goodbye.